Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, and welcome everybody on how to blow up the wall of flesh in v2.0 Master Mode. Now, this is a journey world here, which is just for demonstration on how wall of flesh works, because in journey mode, Master Mode, v2.0, the wall of flesh actually has way more HP and the setup doesn't work. So I have to show you how it works in the classic world. But this is just for demonstration. So the wall of flesh has three components: a top eye, a bottom eye, and the mouth in the center. Some hungry things, I guess. Either way, the eyes actually always try to squeeze into the nearest available open space. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically try and manipulate the wall of flesh to squeeze into a tight corridor. Worth noting, you have to have at least 2 tile high of blocks in order for the wall of flesh's eyes to consider this a floor or a ceiling. Which means this one tile here, as in most buildings like sections so to speak, do not actually count for the wall of flesh as a floor or a ceiling. In fact, this is basically just, for all intents and purposes, a hollow part for the wall of flesh where it's going to expand really far out and then contracts again afterwards because it's kind of short section. Either way, besides that, let me demonstrate. The wall of flesh is going to come from the east side, because this is basically the east side of the world. It makes sense. And then, here, the wall of flesh is basically going to, with its eye, going to squeeze below the ceiling here, and this other eye is going to just keep going further and further over until a point where it can no longer squeeze hard enough, because it's just too tight together. For reference, the tightest I could make the wall of flesh be is 13 tiles without it being basically too janky. You can actually squeeze it a little bit further, but this is the tightest I could reasonably have it. And if you were to just continue this floor and ceiling for the entirety of the world, this is literally just how the wall of flesh would look at that point on how tight it would be. So yeah, 13 tiles is basically as tight as I could reasonably make it. But for our purposes, to blow up the wall of flesh, that is actually not necessary to go all that way, because an explosion here has a reach of 20 by 20. So to the right is actually 1 tile taller, as well as to the bottom it's 1 tile further than to the left, because 20 you don't have an exact center. Either way, this is the exact explosion radius, if you'd like to see it this way here, where basically, well, if you go every 11 blocks, you will guarantee that the explosive is not going to hit the next explosive, which is going to be important in just a second here. So, this is just a quick explanation. Let's get to the actual world where I'm going to do my demonstration, so to speak. So, this is the setup here. We are on the west side of the world here, and I just kind of chose this spot more or less randomly, but also as a demonstration here. So this is where I just tested where does the wall of flesh go if I just put in a voodoo doll here into this little pool of lava here, because that's a reasonably protected place, so we can just do that from there. Now, this is kind of where the thing is. I recommend just kind of choosing a place where it is already going to be squeezed tighter together than what it is here, but this is basically as a demonstration. I just kind of have a staircase of 4 blocks each time in order to squeeze the wall of flesh tighter and tighter together, always 2 tiles high or low, depending on your definition I guess, in order for this to work. You can actually technically sometimes just go 4 blocks, 3 blocks, 4 blocks. I just always go 4 blocks in the staircase, because that kind of makes it simple and I don't have to worry about things. Now, further worth noting, for my build I actually used a peace candle, 3 NPCs and a sunflower in 2 spots here in order to reduce the enemy spawns dramatically. It's still not going to be, well, 0, but let me put it this way, you won't have a powered up character like this one if you just try to complete v2.0 Master Mode. And especially on hardcore, it's kind of important to, well, not die in the meantime, I guess. So, now how this setup works is the short version. This lever here, it will activate the first explosives and then the first timer. After the first timer gets activated, it's gonna blow up this one here. This explosive and then it activates this timer and this explosive. This timer is going to activate this explosive and this timer. It's basically just going to be one chain reaction all the way through. So I have one color in order to activate the entire contraption, in this case green, and then I just alternate between red and blue every time. So this is basically just kind of the short version of this setup. Now, compared to my previous setup on how I had it, I actually had to put in an interrupt on the 9th where I have a half-second timer, but that's no longer necessary because I plan to blow up the timer as well in order to just kind of make it simpler. So if you are still thinking of that version, don't worry about the interrupt. Either way, the short version is, these are 21 explosives, and the goal is for each explosive to hit all 3 parts of the wall of flesh. The top eye, the bottom eye, and the mouth, basically dealing more or less triple damage. Usually 20 explosives is enough, but if you get really unlucky on damage rolls, you probably want to have number 21 as well. So, number 1 is activated by lever, 2 is activated by a 1 second timer, 3 is a 1 second timer, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, and then number 9 is a half second timer. Then number 10 is a 1 second timer again, number 11 is a half second timer, a 1 second timer, half second timer, 1 second timer, and then the rest from 13 onwards is just half second timers. I apologize if I just misspoke, you kind of get the idea, I think. Also, this stuff here really doesn't matter, because the wall of flesh is probably going to try and squeeze in tighter. It's never going to actually break out from like this ledge up here. You don't have to worry about that. So, this is kind of the rudimentary setup. I'm going to also explain on how I build it after this, but this is just for demonstration for people who already know what they're doing, so quick video. The wall of flesh is going to appear here, it's going to squeeze in tighter and further and further. I'm going to get annoyed by a slime, but now, first explosive here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. And 21 is just for safety, basically. And this is how we can defeat for the worthy Master Mode Wall of Flesh with basically just having to defeat Skeletron, because you need the mechanic for the wiring. That's it. Everything else, well, going to come in the next part. But if you are here for just the basic setup, this is the basic setup. Now, the less, let's say, scripted part of this entire thing, let me reset the world back to how it was before I set up the entire thing, and we are just going to try and get through this effectively step by step. Gonna choose my character here again, and this is how it was before I set up the entire contraption. So, worth noting, you do not have to create like a tunnel above the entire thing here. It is not really all that necessary. You can actually just run inside here, this is fine. You don't have to worry too much about this. Alright? So, of course, you won't have the luxury of being able to fly on a broom, but always, 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 my friends, check how the wall of flesh is going to basically go. So we just kind of put the voodoo doll of the guide in here. And hey, would you look at this? The wall of flesh is completely up there, so that's of course no good. And then it just kind of keeps going, and it's just going to keep the eye up there. We would not be able to hit the eye up there, as it were. So we kind of have to, well, figure out a way, effectively, to, well, get through this without the wall of flesh being able to be above the entire corridor. This is what I meant with when I said earlier. You will want to figure out a way on, well, basically beginning your entire contraption before the entire thing here is too tight. So here, I'm just gonna do the same concept here, basically just 4, and then 4 again, or 8 blocks total if you will, and then just continue this section here. Now, I'm not entirely sure whether you saw whether the section below was all that well set up, but for the most part it largely doesn't really matter. By the way, I'm just kind of doing this here for convenience and also to speed up the process here. You will of course have to very awkwardly and annoyingly deal with all of these enemies here, just kind of the manual way without being able to climb here. So, maybe worth noting, you can actually just climb along the ceiling here in order to build this up until the point where you would like to have this. So if you of course don't have a mount, you can actually just always use a hookshot in order for you to be able to do the same staircase here, so to speak. So this is just kind of a method of doing this, just building. But if you are trying to do for the worthy master mode, I trust that you're crafty enough to figure these things out anyways. It's more of a, I guess, completionist mention thing or something, whatever you want to call it. Then, of course, at the bottom here, kind of would like to have the wall of flesh, or the lower eye, also somehow get in here as well. So we're just gonna double up on this floor here. That way we guarantee that the wall of flesh eye is going to effectively keep rising up here, and it should then subsequently get to this point here as well. And then you just keep going. Put this here. And just keep going higher. And as long as you are approximately right, this is gonna be fine. And of course in For the Worthy we have explosions in pots. Actually quite fun at the beginning because don't have to mine as much. Later, oh well. Alrighty, so this is basically the basic setup. I'm actually just going to wall this off so we are not gonna get annoyed by all the enemies on the sides here. So we don't have to worry too much about this. Now, I trust you know how to make a floor and a 2-tile ceiling. As real quick to reiterate, I just make this 20 tiles tall. This is easily sufficient. You can make it slightly less, you can make it slightly more. I kind of leave that largely up to you. But I just recommend 20 because that's the easiest way to do this. Then, in order for me to begin with the entire setup here, what I did is I effectively, well, I only need a certain amount of stone platforms in order to go all the way, right? So I just kind of had about 220, 240 platforms and just kind of put these in a separate stack and then just went all the way to the right until I kind of arrived over here somewhere. And that kind of made using the platforms relatively easy. Then, you kind of may want to test your timers before you go ahead and set the explosives. So I recommend putting the explosives later. So you don't have to. If you're confident in your ability to not mess up, I'm not by the way, you can just straight up put the explosives into place and not worry about things. So as mentioned before, every 12 we want to effectively put these explosives on. The first one is going to be activated by a lever, which I'm just going to put, I guess I put it already there, for convenience. As mentioned before, it is safer to just put the lever and the little corridor up top, but it's not necessary per se. Then, basically 10 spaces in between, or every 11 if you will, we put the timer and then basically the explosives will be right over that, so to speak. Kind of. You can, by the way, just staircase these with platforms. It's very convenient to just mark every 11, so to speak, with a platform, and then you just kind of continue doing this all the way. Every 11 with a platform. It's really that simple. Also, as mentioned before, if the natural walls, etc. get tighter, that's not a problem, but just make sure that you do actually patch up potential buildings in the center of it. That is kind of important. So, then, as mentioned before, let me actually real quick check my notes so I don't make a mistake, because I always like to double check. the first is going to be activated by a lever. The second one is a 1 second timer. Then, well, we have a grand total of 7 1 second timers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then we have a half second timer. We put that here. And then we put here, once again, a 1 second timer. And then this next one here is a half second timer again. And then this next one, the 13th, is the last 1 second timer. And the rest of these are going to be basically just half second timers. I used to do this setup with quarter second timer interrupts, but that was basically just to preserve where the timers are. It's just really not all that necessary, so to speak. Just make sure that the spacing is correct. You do not want to be a tile too close, let me put it this way. That would be significantly less than ideal, because the explosion is just about the same size, basically, on that end. So that's the short version. So then let's do the cabling real quick, or wiring, whatever you want to call it. So for me, for convenience, because I like to do always the same things, I just choose green for activating the lever, or we're connecting the lever with the first explosive. It's gonna be here, as well as activating this first 1 second timer. Of course, you don't need this part here, that's just not necessary. So basically, this lever is gonna activate this 1 second timer here, and then this one here. So then we have a different color. I just choose red as my secondary. This timer is going to activate this next timer and the explosive above it. The next one is going to activate this timer, and this explosive above it, etc. And then you can just effectively alternate between the color. So in order to speed up the process of building, because remember, the less time you spend in here giving enemies an opportunity to spawn, the better, because, well, it's gonna otherwise be potentially a little bit awkward. Speaking of a little bit awkward, don't make mistakes. This could just kind of set you back quite a bit. So, basically, during my time, when I'm building this entire contraption, I make 2 tests. One is I'm gonna see whether the wall of flesh, or how the wall of flesh is basically going to come in. And then I make a second test on whether my manipulation to get the wall of flesh into this basic corridor actually worked. And then the next test I'm going to do, actually 3 I guess. The next test I'm going to do is I'm going to test whether my timer setup actually works, because what we want to have happen is that one timer activates the next one. Now here's the catch. Without an interrupt for the half-second timer to only tick once before the next 1 second timer, basically from the next one to the next one, it's actually not going to go any further than here. This timer here is going to activate and deactivate quicker than this 1 second timer can activate, so it's actually going to just stop here. But basically, just kind of as a basic demonstration, this activates this, next, 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 half second next, and then we just kind of are stuck here because, well, this timer here would be blown up. As long as you did the cabling correct, just maybe check the colors or something, we should be fine. Oh yeah, of course, we need kind of one more here, otherwise this is not going to blow up the last explosive. And kind of like most things, I like to just count out the amount of things I use in order to be able to put them there. Now I shouldn't put them here now, because otherwise I'm gonna blow myself up. That would be less than ideal. So, now, the guide hopefully arrived in the meantime, because I've been kind of looking at this contraption here for a while. So I'm actually going to make a backup of the world real quick, just to make sure. There it is. Yeah, this should be thing here. Sorry about this. This is a bit of more ad hoc than usual. Because I don't want to wait the entire day until the guide arrives again. Alright, because that's what you would normally do. Or you just make a backup too, I don't care. Alrighty, so I built now this bridge here, if you remember. And now we check whether the wall of flesh is actually going to move the way we hope it does. And this eye is going down, further down, further down, further down, and it's too high. Alrighty, so we need to basically fix that still. Alright. Excuse me. There we go. Guide should be back. Now we need to go and fix this real quick because the upper eye was still, well, too high up. So an easy way to fix this is to just put more blocks here. Because presumably actually it didn't begin the staircase in time, or however you want to put it. We kind of need to give the entire wall, so to speak, a little bit more time in order to be able to come down. So you would just kind of add more blocks until it effectively fits. So yeah. Optimally, just kind of get this first try without even having to check, but I'm probably just going to check, honestly. That's just what I do. So this more or less should guarantee that the wall of flesh is effectively going to go ahead and, well, move through the area that we expect it to. And I'm just going to go ahead and make a backup again. Oops. And then we test it again. Usually I have other things to do before I want to even enter the hard mode, so to speak, like preparing for defeating the destroyer early, as well as like a farming area for the jungle, because going into the underground jungle in hard mode is kind of rough. Alright, try this again. Throw it in the correct direction, please. Let's see again. The eye is really, really high up. But this time it actually gets under here. And as you can see, it basically just kind of follows us this entire way. That's good. Now, I'm going to real quick put my backup back into stock. That way we still have a guide. Because we are going to go in for real now. So, what you also may want to do, actually you haven't tested this. I don't know whether platforms specifically are actually counting for the purposes of like being considered a ceiling or a floor. No idea. It doesn't really matter too much. Right, now we have 21 explosives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, forgot 12. I'm not good at counting. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. I actually went one too far. Oh well. Doesn't matter, we can just leave it there. Right, and this should be the entire setup you need in order to defeat Wall of Flesh. So, let's go ahead and blow it up for real. As mentioned before, you may want to consider doing like a tunnel and have your lever at the top in order to make this a little bit safer, but I'll leave that entirely up to you. Let's go. We blow this up as soon as it's over the first explosive. Right there. Eh. I somehow messed it up. What did I do? Some people are probably already yelling at me in the comments. On the bright side, this is an easy thing to put back into place, I guess. Oh, I think I see. Alright, this is only 9 weight. This is why you do not put your explosives too close together. Alrighty. Whoops. Kind of embarrassing. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. But, fun fact, if I were to go from right to left, this would not have mattered, because you have 1 tile more leeway. Okay, now I briefly need to wait for the guide to arrive again, and we of course did that just waiting in bed. Hope he arrives quickly. Ah, welcome to you, Kevin. And I apologize in advance, because... No, let's try this again. Oh shoot, I need a voodoo doll. Everything is going wrong. Oh, that's lovely. If you ever visit my stream, yeah, that's pretty much how it goes. There's at least 1 derp per day. That's the quota. And it's not intentionally fulfilled, that's just what happens. Huh. Now we need a voodoo demon. You know these guys that are flying around everywhere all the time and are really annoying usually? Yeah, those guys. I have a blue candle. Don't see a blue candle. Oh well. I really hope this doesn't take too long to find a voodoo demon now. Otherwise I'll have to cut together the video, and my PC is not good, so it would take forever. You know, there is an alternative to finding a voodoo doll that we could use instead. And a lot of people probably already know that. Although it is currently daytime. Oops. Also, apparently, that one thing here counts as a door. Alright. It is 2:02 PM. Maybe we find a voodoo doll before that, I don't know. Let me sleep in the bed, please. That's getting real silly. I deserve that one. "7:30 PM is when the game clock ticks over to being nighttime. And that is also when the NPCs teleport back into their houses, or into their houses in the first place. Unless you're too close to the house or too close to the NPC that is supposed to teleport. Can you tell this is not scripted? I just hope this works with the guy being sacrificed instead of his voodoo doll. Also, hello everybody, I hope you're doing well, I hope you have a good time, and... Why is it so warm in this room? Oh yeah, also NPCs teleport while running as well, so that's that. Alrighty. I apologize guys, but this is for the greater good. Let's do this now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And there we go. It worked. Isn't that nice? Also, Floaty is a great mount. Have a good time. Take care.